Tell us about your delivery story.
Okay, so my delivery story, last September, I found out I was pregnant. My husband and I both found out we were pregnant, and we were very excited. It started out just like any other pregnancy. I was doing my Zumba workouts. I'm a Zumba instructor, still working as a teacher. Everything was going great, and probably about halfway between the pregnancy, I started noticing just some abnormalities in the pregnancy. A close friend of mine noticed that I was more swollen than usual. I, of course, just thought it was a pregnancy symptom. I thought maybe I was eating too many Girl Scout cookies because I was. So I didn't think anything of it. Then about 24 weeks pregnant, I fell and broke my humerus, which is the big bone in your body, or in your arm. And at that time, I came to Wake Med ER, and they said it was broken. My blood pressure was through the roof because I was in pain. But I was sent home, and they said, come back in a week to get your labs redone. Your blood pressure was very high at the time of the incident. So we went home, and a week later I came back to Wake Med to get my labs redone, and my blood pressure was still high. At that time, they said that they were going to admit me to the hospital, which I was shocked. I had never been a patient in the hospital before, so I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why my blood pressure was high, but they actually kept me for 3 days just to monitor me. Finally, on the third day, they diagnosed me with mild preeclampsia. I had never heard of that. I had, but I thought it was something women get later in their pregnancy and not at 24 weeks. So I was shocked, but they said, it's mild, go home and have your husband, who's an EMT, monitor your blood pressure daily. When it gets to a certain number, then come back in. So that's what we did. A week to the day, which was actually Valentine's Day, I had my husband recheck my blood pressure, and had gotten to a specific number that they warned me about, the doctors. So we called the doctor. They advised us to come back to Wake Med, and sure enough, they said, you're going to be admitted again. I wasn't as shocked this time, but they said, you'll probably stay here till you deliver. So we prepared ourselves for that. I figured I'd be on bed rest for a while. They did labs again overnight, and then early the next morning, a team of Wake Med doctors came in and said that the preeclampsia had progressed. It's a disease that just worsens, and they said that I would deliver that day. At that time, I was 26 weeks in 1 day, so it was shocking because you prepared mentally to have a full-term baby, especially for your first baby, which this was. So we had a team of doctors come in. One was a doctor from the Wake Med NICU, and they told us a bunch of statistics, a bunch of data, and pretty much what to expect. At that time, we were just very overwhelmed. It was a lot of information. It's something we obviously didn't plan on. But honestly, they made me feel comfortable with the situation for what it was. The numbers and the statistics were high for my 26-weeker here at Wake Med. I knew that she would have great care here. So I was at peace with the circumstances for what it was. And we got started in the delivery process. We actually tried to have her naturally. I was induced. And by sometime that afternoon, on the 15th of February, they said that my baby's blood pressure and heart rate were dropping. So we decided to do a C-section, and my baby was born that night at 10:15, and she was weighing 1 pound and 11 ounces. She was a 26-weeker, and she was 13 inches long. So definitely, a shock. We had not prepared for it, and we were shocked, when she had come, because we had not expected her to be that size.
Tell us about your journey in the NICU.
The NICU journey is a roller coaster. It's just something you hear people talk about, you can read about it, but you don't know it until you live it. We were very blessed that because we live almost an hour away, the Ronald McDonald House here at Wake Med, which is on the 3rd floor, they accepted us, and we stayed here pretty much the whole NICU journey. Everybody's NICU journey is different. Some people are here a week, some people are here for 4 months like I was. And, you know, you kind of compare yourself, I think, to others around you, which is something you don't want to do. But everybody's different. The Ronald McDonald House was very accommodating. I was able to be only a floor away from my baby. We had a fantastic team of nurses. You are allowed to request a nurse as your primary, or nurses can request your family. We actually did not request any. We ended up with 6 requesting us, and it was a blessing. We always had a primary almost every time we were here. But the NICU was just full of ups and downs. You celebrate the smallest milestone. You celebrate the smallest celebration. I mean, it's just something that you have highs and lows. The nurses become your best friends, a lot of them, and you learn to live with the NICU as your second home, which is a good and bad thing. But the NICU became my second home for sure. It was some days a safe haven because I could go to the nurses and I could vent and I can share my worries, and then other days the dings of the machines, they get to you, which is normal. So it's just a roller coaster, and when you get home, you'll actually miss it a little bit. You'll miss the comfort of having people around you, but ultimately your goal the whole NICU journey is to go home with your baby. So it's definitely full of ups and downs.
So tell us a little bit more about when you got home.
So when I got home, my baby, I have a baby girl, she had been in here for 4 months. They originally give you your due date as the day that you are expected to go home. That's a projected day. They hope that you go home. We had been a week over her due date, and by that time you're getting antsy. You're ready to go. And when they finally say, well, I think it's time, for you to get going in the next couple of days, it's just a shock. Because for me, this is all I had known for 4 months, and I almost felt like, this is where we'll be forever. Of course, I knew that we wouldn't, but it felt like that some days. So when they told us we're going home, my husband and I first were elated, and then we panicked because we realized, okay, we got to go home and scrub everything. We got to get prepared, especially first baby. Don't know what to expect. So we went home. We bought Lysol. We bought hand sanitizer, and we just prepared. The day she came home was so bittersweet. I mean, these people become your family. This became my home. And while I was excited to go home, I was petrified. And that's just a normal feeling. I think that going home was harder than I expected because, like I said, that's your ultimate goal. But when I got home and you're used to not doctors and nurses being the primary caregiver of your child because, they need assistance. Whenever you get home and it's just you, it's very different. I was more overwhelmed at home a lot of times than I was in the NICU just because you had so much support, and then you go to, your husband's working, your family's at work, and you're home by yourself with your preemie. So it was overwhelming, a lot more than I expected, but, it's definitely a transition. I had a hard time, getting used to not having to step over cords. You're constantly worrying, where's all the gear, and you realize, oh, it's not there. If you're blessed to come home without, any oxygen and things like that. But it's definitely a transition. I wish in hindsight someone had told me that it would be more difficult than it was because I did not expect, to come home and not have the support like you did in the NICU. So it was definitely bittersweet for sure.
Tell us, do you still have challenges from your NICU stay?
I do. In particular with my baby, she was born so small and so early. She actually had a brain bleed, and we discovered that at her last routine MRI. She had it in her cerebellum, which is the back part of your brain, and there was substantial brain damage from that. She doesn't have much of a cerebellum left, which means her motor coordination, her balance, things of that nature are a struggle for her. So coming home from the NICU, I thought that maybe the NICU would be the scariest part, but getting home for me, getting her enrolled in physical therapy, getting her into certain programs to help her, those are challenges in itself. I'm a chronic Googler. I Google things, and that's so bad. I advise, NICU families not to do that, because you Google something and scary stuff pops up and it may not be accurate. So that's been a challenge for me personally. My husband, he will scold me when he sees me on Google, but because you don't have the doctors and nurses, you do try to find answers yourself, which is not always the best thing. But I would say for me, just the aftercare from the NICU, the physical therapy for my baby, trying not to Google scary things. That's probably been my biggest challenge from life after the NICU.
And how old is your baby now?
She was born at 26 weeks and 1 day, and now she is 9 months actual, and in preemie terms, she is 6 months adjusted.
And tell us about how you are coping.
I think for me, the biggest struggle, or one of the biggest struggles that I wish someone had told me was normal, was bonding with my baby. I think for a typical full-term baby, we all hear the stories of, the baby's born, you put them on your chest, it's a magical moment, a bond. Whereas for a lot of preemie moms and dads, it's a very unexpected birth, like mine was. It's shocking. For me, I was on a medicine called magnesium, so I could not, leave my bed to go to the NICU for at least 24 hours after she was born. So for me not to even meet my baby for almost 48 hours after birth, and then not hold my baby for even a week after she was born, I think that it's harder to bond than a lot of people expect. And as a mother, I think that sounds terrible. I didn't bond with my baby, because that's such a natural thing for mothers to do. But when life throws you lemons, which this was an unexpected lemon, it was hard to bond with her. And two, I think that because you're scared about what's going to happen, I think I was scared to bond with her in case something did happen, which is just the truth of how I felt. And as bad as that may sound, I wish someone had told me that that's a normal feeling. I was scared to bond with her in the beginning because you just didn't know what would happen, the unknown. So bringing a baby home that you didn't have time to bond with properly was hard. That's something hard to still cope with, but you love your baby more every day. It may not be a typical birth story, but it's yours.
Done.